Chapter 10. Move It, Cliff Richard and the Drifters, the song that launched my career, and it was written on a bus. After I had heard so much great rock and roll music, by 1958 I decided it was time to start making some myself. After I had quit Dick Teague's skiffle band, the Drifters had been making some progress. Norman, Terry and I rehearsed at my home every chance we got, and we'd even done our first live concert in March 1958 at the local badminton club where I played with my dad. We went down pretty well, if I say so myself. The pace picked up a little when we got ourselves a manager. It's a story I told in The Dreamer, and again, I never tire of telling. After a gig at the now long-gone Five Horseshoes pub in Hoddesdon, near to Cheshunt, a lanky guy wandered up as we packed our gear away and announced to me, "I can make you a star." The guy's name was John Foster, and he wasn't exactly low grade. His job was driving a lorry in the local sewage works, but he did say one thing that excited us. He knew a man called Tom Littlewood who booked the acts at the Two Eyes Coffee Bar in London, and he told us he could get us a gig there. It's hard to explain nowadays just what a big deal the Two Eyes was. The coffee bar had a downstairs gig venue that some of the biggest names in the nascent British pop scene had played. Tommy Steele, Terry Dean, the nearest things that the UK had to rock and rollers at that point, had both been discovered playing there. If I'm honest, I wasn't a huge fan of Tommy or Terry. Of course, Tommy Steele later found his niche in musical theatre and was brilliant at it. Their music kicked things off here, but it sounded a bit too English, i.e. non-American, for my liking. But I knew how crucial a gig at the Two Eyes could be for aspiring rock and rollers. John fixed up a Saturday afternoon audition with Tom Littlewood for us a week or two later. We got the Green Line bus to London and couldn't have been more excited to be walking around buzzing Soho, our guitars around our necks. Our audition went well, and Tom even asked us to come back and play a few songs that night. We went down okay, so he booked us in to do a full week of shows at the club. That week was exhilarating and pretty eventful. We rocked the cellar with our Elvis, Ricky Nelson, Eddie Cochran covers and had a couple of interesting chance encounters. One night, a girl called Jan Vane collared us after we had finished playing. Jan was in the Two Eyes celebrating her 16th birthday. She told us she thought we were great and she'd like to start a fan club for us. It cracked us up. The only fans we have are our families, I told her. We're only starting, but sure, feel free if you want to. Well, Jan didn't know what she was getting herself into. Within 2 years, that fan club was to be the biggest in Britain, with hundreds of thousands of members. She ran it for donkey's years. Yet, with all respect to the lovely Jan, another of our encounters at the Two Eyes was to be even more significant for us. One evening, a smart young guy with a quiff came up, introduced himself. He was a couple of years older than us, and his name was Ian Samwell. Ian said he was on leave from the RAF, where he was just finishing his national service, and in his spare time he was playing the guitar in a skiffle band. Ian was like me. His heart was with rock and roll, not skiffle. He asked if we might need another guitarist. We asked him to bring his guitar down the next day and play to us. When he did, he was clearly a lot more skilled than Norman or me. Ian was in. In fact, he played his first gig as a drifter that night. That Two Eyes week also saw me change my name. It wasn't my idea. In fact, I'd never even thought of it. But a nightclub owner from Ripley in Derbyshire called Harry Gretrix wandered into the cellar looking for bands to book for his club. He liked the look of us and offered us a gig. There was one stipulation, though. Harry didn't want just to hire the Drifters. In those days, the trend was for bands to have their singer's name up front. Bill Haley and his Comets, Dion and the Belmonts. Mr. Gratrix wanted us to do the same. "What's your name, son?" he asked me. "Harry Webb." "Okay, so you're Harry Webb and the Drifters." "No!" As soon as it left his lips, it felt wrong to me. I'd never really liked my first name. Harry sounded ordinary, boring, square, and, most important of all, not rock and roll. "I don't want to do that," I said quickly. "Well, you need a singer's name, or you can't play my club." "We'll be back shortly, Mr. Gratrix," said John Foster. "Just wait here, please." And we decamped to a pub round the corner to rename me. We ran through a few ideas. Russ Clifford. Rich Clifford? Cliff Russert? But none of them felt right. Somebody suggested Cliff Richards, and I mulled it over as I sipped my beer. I loved Cliff straight away. It sounded like a cliff made of rock, a cliff made of rock and roll. But Richards wasn't quite there. Our newest member, Ian Samwell, who had only been in the band for 2 days, came to the rescue. "Why not take the S off Richards and be Cliff Richard," he said. "Interviewers will say Cliff Richards by mistake, and you can correct them. They'll have to say your name twice, which means everyone will remember it." Ha ha! What a master plan, huh? So, Cliff Richard it was. Harry Gratrix was pleased and slapped Cliff Richard and the Drifters on posters when we played his club in Derbyshire a few weeks later. For my part, I took to my new name straight away. I have to say, for a lorry driver, John Foster was proving surprisingly adept at band management. He got us a couple of unpaid gigs at teenage clubs at the Gaumont in Shepherd's Bush. At the second one, excited kids screamed at us and chased me down the street. I had to hide in a public toilet. A policeman escorted me out. Wow, things were suddenly happening, and they seemed to be happening even faster when John booked us into a tiny recording studio, a recording cupboard really, above HMV in Oxford Street, to make a demo. It cost us £5 to record Elvis's Lordy Miss Glaudy and Breathless by Jerry Lee Lewis.